Now I've been away for a little while, but I'm back in the saddle. So sit back and enjoy because I'm Pete, and this is Board Game Recap. We're going to get started again with some terrain for a new game I've been getting into called Star Wars Legion. It's a miniature war game set in the Star Wars universe, and since I've been little, I've been a huge fan of all the Star Wars films. The first project we're going to build is a bunker from the classic Endor scene that you see where they take down the shield generator. I know it's probably a lot of information for some of you guys, but the Star Wars fans will know what I'm talking about, and either way, it's a really cool build, and I'm excited that you guys are coming along the journey with me. So let's get to it. First step on this project is really just building a foundation to add all the details to. And I just did that with some dollar store Foamcore, cut the angles to get sort of a sloped, almost like pyramid shape for the entire building to match the movie specs as close as possible. And then using that same angle, I cut out basically that sort of recessed doorway as well. We'll add in the actual door later, but wanted to make sure that we had that opening. And a couple of different times I used an actual model to test to make sure that it was the right height and width and fit well with the movie look. And these are basically just getting glued together so that we have a foundation for the project. And what that's going to do is allow us to add all the details, add some basically cardstock to the outside to clean up all the seams and stuff, but we got to have something for it to attach to. I learned this lesson the hard way by building it initially directly out of cardstock, and it was tough. The seams didn't match up. Nothing really looked quite right, and so I realized that if I build it out of Foamcore and then wrap it in cardstock, it'll get a much better look in the end. And so that's what we're doing here, is just building that foundation to add all the details onto. Once that glue is all dry and the foundation is ready to go, it's time to add that outside shell to that foundation. And I started with the roof because it's going to be super simple. It's just a really plain, smooth surface on there, and I just used photo mat board to attach to the outside. It was nice and thick. It gave it some weight and some sturdiness, and I knew I could, distress it and beat it up later. But it was also thin enough that I could hide those seams and make it match up really easily. On most of this part, for the roof at least, it's all sort of custom fit to make sure that it matches. And so there was a lot of measuring and cutting and adjusting and that sort of thing. Later on, we'll see some templates that fit the bottom walls much nicer, but on this one, I didn't think it was worth it to make those templates. So really just cut to fit and glue it in place. I did use super glue because I wanted to set up quickly and be done with this part and move on to the next one. Here you're going to see I built a sort of a 3D model of this project on my computer to begin with, and I used some of those panels from that 3D model to create these templates. And all this template is going to do is allow us to print it off on regular printer paper, glue it onto some cardstock, and then that will give us really precise measurements and the exact fit that we need to skin onto that foundation that we built. And there's several different like versions of lines. It's all printed on one template, and we're going to make 2 sort of inset copies of that. So you'll see here in a minute where once they're all cut out and glued up, it sort of goes together as a sandwich to give a couple layers of depth. It's a pretty cool look, and I think it accomplished it much better than I initially thought it was going to be honest. And here's where you'll see we're going to take those sandwich pieces and put them together. And while the holes on the one piece are smaller than the other, that allows it to be the sort of the step down look that mimics what's in the movies. It's not exactly right, but I think it gives the impression that we're looking for. And so gluing those 2 together and then adding them to the actual foundation is the method I chose to put these together. But you can kind of see as we hold it up here that there's just a step down look. It gives a little bit more depth, a little more interest than just one version of it. So pretty cool effect, and we're going to add some details to where those holes are as well once it's all glued up and ready to go. Once those sandwiches, if you will, are in place, I actually took the inside cutouts of those templates to create another template, and you'll see those sort of horizontal lines across them, and all I did was dig those out with an X-Acto knife, and so cut those out so that I have a nice big thick groove, and we're going to actually place those inside those sandwiches, just like you see here, and run that X-Acto knife through that groove to get the perfect length and height of the cuts. And so that way they're uniform all around the entire project. To be honest, I don't remember how I came up with this method, but when it worked out on one of the sides, I ran with it. And so you'll see there's some vertical lines too, but we add those in manually just to get, you know, a basic idea. And you'll see that's where we're doing right here, is we're just adding on the end of those. It's really hard to see here, I get it, but we're adding some just perpendicular lines to the outside and the inside. And what we're going to do is we're going to push those in here in a minute, and it's going to create the look of like a vent, similar to the way it looks like on the movie. Once that's all done, you'll see on the left there, you can see sort of the finished product, what it's going to look like, and right there in the middle, I'm using just a sculpting tool to press down along those lines we cut. And so if you sort of push it down, it's just foam core that we're cutting into right there, and so when you push it down, it likes to stay put, and eventually it'll get covered up and sealed up, and so it won't want to spring back to shape. But just being gentle and going slow on this was the method I found worked the best. And like I said, this part all turned out much better than I anticipated, and it was turned out to be much easier to accomplish than I thought it would be too. There was a lot of iterations and versions of this, and it turned out to be just cutting those lines and pressing down the foam gave the best look. And here you'll see I'm using a similar template to create the door. And this one is a little bit trickier. It's a little bit more detailed, a lot more cuts per square inch, I guess. But I think it really turned out nicely, and it's another template that I just created on the computer so that I can make sure that all the sizes are right. And if I do it on there, I can tweak the measurements without having to move the ruler around, draw it, and retest it. But once those are cut out, it really just gets glued right in there. And I wound up having to cut the little top part of that door off in order to make it fit, but it all turned out all right. And then I noticed in the movie there was these like little, I don't know, rectangle light things. I don't know what they are, but they come in a very sort of strange pattern where it's one on the left, three in the middle, and I think two on the right. And really all I did is take a little piece of balsa wood, cut it into, identical shaped rectangles, and then drilled a small hole in the top of them to get the sort of idea to mimic what was in the movies. And then those are just super glued on. Eventually they get painted to match the rest, and so they blend in a little bit, but it really sort of sells the idea that this is matches the movie. And as with most of my projects, you just base coat in black, and what that allows us to do is give us some pre-built-in shadows, so we're not as concerned with the next color going on if we don't get it super thick in some of the recesses. But it also just ties everything together. So we have some lighter whites, some off-whites, some wood on the project, and painting it all black just ties it together, gives us a good foundation to start with. I did it with the airbrush, so I didn't have to worry about that foam melting, but it could have been done with a spray can as long as you sealed up that foam. And then just sort of a light, just dull gray, to be honest, over the whole thing. And then here's when I'm building, painting a panel that I built for where like R2-D2 plugs in to open up the door. And it's really just a couple of pieces of cardstock stacked up to give an illusion of depth. And then I took some tiny little dowel rods and some I think it's like a bamboo skewer and a couple of other things, and just cut thin slices off that and glued it on so it would look like buttons or lights or whatever it is. And so I didn't try to match the pictures of the movie. I didn't really even look for pictures. I figured that like you'd get the idea if we built the right colors, and to be honest, it's going to be in that recessed part of the doorway anyway, so it's not going to get a whole lot of light. But figured at some point during a campaign or during a game you may need access to open the door or whatever. And so I went ahead and built it, and you can see I'm just painting different shades of gray, some metallic, some dark gray, and then on those buttons wanted to make sure I got some brighter pops in there, because the whole project was looking like just a bunch of different shades of gray. And so added some reds and some blues and even a little bit of yellow, I think, just to give it a little bit of pop in there. I didn't want to stray too far from the movie, but I figured this was a good place to give it a little bit of variety. And once that's all painted up, I went ahead and glued it in right there in the door recess, but adding that color quickly made me realize that the rest of it is just a very plain sort of battleship gray and looks a little boring. So I wanted to give it a little bit of accent. So I picked just a little bit darker shade of the same gray and decided to paint those, one of those step downs, just to give it a little bit of variety. And later we'll add in some weathering and some shades and some washes and that sort of thing. But I felt that it really just needed something a little different to make those step downs, those recesses pop. And this is what I came up with, and I think it turned out pretty good. And then this is where I'm going to start sort of the weathering process. And so I realized that those vents would probably have some water or collection if they were on the forest moon of Endor, right? And so wanted to give a little bit of wear and tear to those, make it look like there was maybe some chip paint or some just moisture gathered there. And then when that turned out pretty good, I decided, well, let's just add even some more. And so both of these are homemade washes. The first one was just a black wash, and this one is a little more brown. So it's brown and black paint mixed with just distilled water. And I wanted to get it in all sort of the places that moisture might collect. So if it's sort of like in this rainforesty climate, I want to make sure that I caught some places where some of that moisture might collect. So all those corners got a good dosing of it, and then sort of feathered it out both horizontally and then up vertically along those lines. And you'll see eventually here too, in those corners, I decided, well, eventually that water would drip down somewhere. And so wanted to sort of make like wear lines or drip lines from there. And as I went around the entire thing and added those in, thought it looked really great. And then all of a sudden the roof looked really plain. And so that's kind of like the theme of this paint job, is that, you know, take it one step and then realize that something else looks really plain. So let's add some more to that. I was really happy with how those turned out, and so like I said, I decided to add it to the roof as well, and this was super nerve-wracking. I had never really done any of this kind of weathering before in any of my previous projects, so I was a little nervous, but all I really needed to do was just fill up that brush with some wash, and I ran against the seam. Anywhere where it pooled up, I decided, well, that's a good place to make a drip point. And then I connected some of those. I just ran it down, and I think it turned out pretty cool. So without further ado, here's the finished project. Hope you enjoyed that build as much as I did. We have a few more Star Wars themed builds coming up in the next couple of videos, so stay tuned for that. To make sure you don't miss it, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all the good YouTube stuff. But that's all I've got for now. So thanks for tuning in, because I'm Pete, and this is Board Game Refab.